The Talmud says that you shouldn't say the full praise of someone in front of him. So I was going to start when he wasn't here, but as is, I'm only going to say half the praise. There was a great yeshiva, the first modern yeshiva, which all yeshivas now are modeled after, and that is Volozhin. It started in the early 1800s, and it continued to 1891 or 93, I don't recall. And it was by far the greatest influence on Torah in Eastern Europe during those years, to produce great Rabbonim, Rosh Yeshiva, heads of yeshivas, rabbinical leaders that we talk about with awe. One of my teachers, a grandson of the Chavetz Chaim, Rav Gershon Zaks, who spoke with Rabbi Schachter on occasion, once told me that were Rabbi Schachter a student in that yeshiva, which had the greatest of the great rabbis in Europe, he would have been from the best amongst them. Rabbi Schachter is extremely humble. That is his hallmark, and we are very, very fortunate to have a Rav, a Rosh Yeshiva, who knows the entire Talmud and all sections of the Code of Jewish Law. We are very, very honored by his presence, and without further ado, I give you Rabbi Hershel Schachter.
Good evening. We have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. 2 of these mitzvahs are Kibud Aviyim and Mora Aviyim. Kibud we usually translate to honor one's parents, and Mora we usually translate to fear the parents. The Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Gemara, what is the definition of the mitzvah of Kibud? Take a look at number 2. What is the definition of honor? So the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Gemara that the word kibud in this context doesn't mean to honor, it means to give service to the parents. If the parents need help, I have to feed my father, I have to give him something to drink, he needs some help to get dressed, I have to cover him, he wants me to drive him to the airport, he wants me to carry his luggage. My father would like to go visit Eretz Yisrael, so he'd like me to make all the phone calls, make all the arrangements, to make the hotel arrangements and the flight arrangements and so on. So I have to give service to the parents. So the mitzvah of kibud, we usually translate kibud means to honor. It's not really to honor, it means to give service to the parents. I used to ask my father died at the age of 94, several years ago. So I used to ask my father when he was already older, would he like me to make him a cup of coffee, or does he need some help? So my father would always get upset. What am I, an invalid? I don't need any help. So the mitzvah to service the parents is if they're interested in having the service. If they say, no, thank you, I'm not an invalid, I want to do it myself, so then there's no din of kibud aviyim. That's what the Shulchan Aruch quotes. Where is this? Shulchan Aruch says that the parent can be mochel on his kavod. It's probably here in this sheet also. It says in Shulchan Aruch, I don't know if it's on the sheet, but the parent can say, don't do me any favors, no thank you, I don't need that service. Then the other mitzvah of mora, fear, that's described in the first sif, number 1, the first paragraph on the sheet. So does fear mean we should be afraid of our parents? So there's a strange statement in the Rambam like that. The Rambam wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs where he lists off all of the 613 mitzvahs and he gives you a brief description of each one. So he says one has to fear his parents, like you will be afraid of someone who can harm you. So we don't understand what that means. What is the mitzvah to be afraid? My parents love me, they don't want to harm me. So the simple shot in the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara, you take a look at the first paragraph, the first sif, what is Mora? So they give you the definition. Mora doesn't mean fear. Mora means to give respect, but we usually define as kibud, respect. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Gemara, that's what Mora is. You shouldn't stand, my father always davened Shemona Esrei here, my father's still alive, so I'm going to daven in his spot. So that's a violation of Mora. My father always sits in this seat. I'm going to sit in his seat. That's a violation of Mora. My father, I'm going to call my father by his first name. A lot of people today, a lot of the parents want to feel younger. So they want their children to call them by the first name, that they should feel as if they're buddies of their children. So Rabbi Hershel Schachter said that that's not even permissible, even though the parents are moichel on the kavod, even though that's what they're requesting. That's considered a bizoyan. That's considered an insult to the parents to refer, even though they want it, because they feel that they'll have the attitude as if they're younger, but that's not permissible. The parent can be moichel on the kavod, but they can't be moichel on their bizoyan. That's not allowed. So the nature of the two mitzvahs is a little bit mistranslated. The mitzvah of kibbutz doesn't really mean to give honor to the parents, it means to give service to the parents. And the mitzvah of Mora doesn't really, we usually don't define it like the Rambam said, that one should fear his parents like one would fear a Nazi stormtrooper. It doesn't mean to fear the parents, it means to show respect for the parents. The Shulchan Aruch says when the parents come into the room, strictly speaking, we're supposed to stand up out of respect for the parents. Today, I think most people don't stand up, so we assume that the parents are moichel on the kavod. They have a right to be moichel on the kavod, tifrago. The Shulchan Aruch makes a statement, quoting from the Gemara again, that the din of kibud, mechabdo b'chayim, mechabdo lachamosa. The children are obligated to show, to give service to the parents. Kavod means to give service to the parents even after the parents die. How can you give service to the parents after they die? So it probably means Mora. You have to show respect for the parents. I shouldn't call my father by his first name. I shouldn't refer to my parents by the first name, even after they die. That means you can show respect to the parents who are not alive. How can you give service to the parents? So the Shulchan Aruch gives an example of giving service to the parents after they die. It's an interesting bit. In the Shulchan Aruch, it's section 9. Oh, it's not here on this sheet. Oh, it is. No. Section Sif Tes. So Shulchan Aruch gives the following example. Within the first year after someone dies, so there is a concern that the person may be punished in Gehenna. The Talmud has a tradition that the maximum, the worst Rasha in the world, suffers in Gehenna is 12 months. That was the biggest punishment you can ever imagine, because the Mabul, the flood that's described in Parshas Noach, took a whole year. So the maximum that anyone ever suffers a punishment in Gehenna is a year. So that's why the Zohar makes a statement that if the children are concerned that maybe the parents will be suffering in Gehenna, some averos that they did, so the Zohar recommends that the child should recite Kaddish, and thereby be poda, redeem his parents from suffering in Gehenna. We have a custom that we don't recite Kaddish after a parent dies for the full 12 months. We don't want to indicate as if my parents are going to suffer in Gehenna the maximum of the 12 months. So the custom has it that one is reciting Kaddish for a parent, only says for 11 months. Every so often you have someone who's reciting Kaddish for someone else who died in shul, and it's not a parent. So if it's not one's parent, so there's no issue of kibbut aviyim, so then the custom, then you have the custom, then you say the Kaddish for the full 12 months. That maybe the fellow is really going to suffer to the maximum, the 12 months, and he can use this Kaddish to redeem him. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes this practice of reciting Kaddish, and this is considered service to the parents. The parents may possibly be suffering in Gehenna. When my parents died, I wasn't so worried. So I said Kaddish every day, but I traveled by plane every so often, and I didn't make everybody crazy to make a minyan on the plane. I wasn't so worried. My parents weren't going to Gehenna anyway, so I said a little bit of Kaddish, but I wasn't so concerned. But the reciting of the Kaddish is not considered, it's not an issue of showing respect for the parents, it's considered giving service to the parents. if according to this tradition that's recorded in the Zohar, that the parents may be suffering in Gehenna 11 months, 12 months, and by the children reciting Kaddish, they spare their parents from this suffering, so that's considered giving service to the parents. Or the Shulchan Aruch gives another statement. Let's say a parent died, and the child wants to mention the parent in conversation. So within the first year, the proper practice should be the child should say, Hareini kaparas mishkavo. I accept upon myself whatever suffering my parents may deserve. If the Beis Din Shamayla, the heavenly court, decided that the parents should suffer, so sometimes they'll make them suffer wherever, Gehenna, wherever, and they won't allow me to accept. Someone did an Aveira and he deserves punishment, so why should I be allowed to make a deal with the heavenly court, punish me instead of them? But sometimes the Beis Din will accept it, the heavenly Beis Din will accept it. So the child should say, I want to accept upon myself any suffering, any punishment that my parent deserves. I would rather lighten their burden and give me the punishment in this world. So if the Beis Din Shamayla may accept it, they may accept that offer. So that's also considered lightening the burden of the parents. So that's considered a form of kibud. So that's kibud, means service, giving service to the parents even after they die, by lightening their burden. After the first year is up, and the maximum a parent may possibly suffer in Gehenna is only up until 12 months. So then when one mentions the parents in conversation, so it doesn't make sense to continue to say, Hareini kaparas mishkova, I accept upon myself whatever suffering they deserve, because whatever suffering they deserved is already finished, it's gone. So then you just say, Zechrona livracha. So you say, my father, may he rest in peace. So that's out of respect for the father. That's Mora. Mora is the mitzvah to show respect. But Kibud is the mitzvah to give service. So the way you give service is by accepting upon oneself within the first 12 months whatever suffering they may possibly deserve. It's interesting, the Mishnah records this practice reciting Hareini kaparas mishkava in other cases as well. The Mishnah says when the Kohen Gadol is observing Avelis, and we have an obligation to show respect to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, to show respect to him and to help him out whenever he needs some help. So the people who come to be Menachem Ovel should accept upon themselves, we accept whatever suffering you're supposed to have. You're suffering because your parent died and you're heartbroken over it. So we accept upon ourselves the suffering, if that'll spare you from agony, from suffering. That's out of respect and out of giving service to the Kohen Gadol. Mishnah has the same expression, that those who come to be Menachem Ovel say that to the Kohen Gadol. So here the Talmud says the child should make such a statement when mentioning the parent within the first year. He should say, Hareini kaparas mishkava, and he should mean it. I accept upon myself whatever suffering the parent deserves. What happens, let's say, my father is interested in visiting Eretz Yisrael. So he tells me, Hershel, I'd like to go to Eretz Yisrael. So I say, okay, give me a credit card, and I'll call up the hotel, and I'll call the airline, and I'll make all the arrangements. He says, no, your credit card. You have the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim, so you spend the money. So the Gemara has a discussion of this, and the Shulchan Aruch quotes, is it here? I don't know if it's here in this sheet. Oh, it's on the Rambam. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Rambam, from the Gemara, it's in the Gemara, that if the father has money in the bank, the son is not obligated to spend his money for the purpose of kibbud av. I'll call on my father's telephone. I'll be happy to make all the arrangements. I'll drive him to the airport. I'll carry his luggage, but I'm not obligated to spend money on the deal. Unless the father doesn't have, and the child does have money, so then the Shulchan Aruch quotes, the child is obligated to spend money on the father. The mitzvah of kibbud av has to have some limit. It can't be we're obligated to service the parents to no end. Let's say the parents live in California and the children live in New York, and the father calls on the phone, I need some help, please come and make me a cup of coffee. It's not reasonable. The mother says she doesn't feel well, could you please come for Shabbos and help me bake the challah? What do you mean, I should go from New York to California to help out on Shabbos? It has to be within reason. So the Shulchan Aruch, the very last line in Siman Reish Mem, in this chapter, states, here it's number 3 in the list of the Marmakamas in English, if a parent protests against whom his child wants to marry, the child need not hate his parent. There's no mitzvah of kibbud aviyim I fell in love with a certain girl, and my parents are not happy about it. They say they prohibit me from marrying that girl. So there's no din of kibbut aviyim over there. Why not? So the Vilna Gaon, in number 4, the Vilna Gaon in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch quotes that there are 3 independent reasons why this din is so, and each one of the reasons is a valid reason on its own. So one reason is that the mitzvah of kibbut aviyim doesn't apply. Take a look at number 5. If the parent is requesting of the child, he should do something that's against the din. So my father says on Shabbos, "Can you please drive me to the movies? I like to go to movies on Shabbos." So I said, "I'm not allowed to drive on Shabbos. I can't take you to the movies." Or let's say he wants me to violate a rabbinical din. Driving on Shabbos, we assume, is a biblical prohibition. Driving an automobile on Yom Tov, we assume, is a rabbinical prohibition, but it's prohibited. So my father asked me on Yom Tov, "Could you please drive me to the movies? I want to go to the movies on Yom Tov." He wants to go to the movies, that's his asik, that's his business. But I'm not allowed to drive him to the movies on Yom Tov either. That's a rabbinical prohibition. So there's no mitzvah of kibbut av over there. What if my father, let's say my mother passed away 20 years before my father. So I said Kaddish, and my father says, "I get the heebie-jeebies when you say Kaddish, I'm still alive. I don't want you to say Kaddish. I prohibit you. You're aggravating me." So the Shulchan Aruch says that's unreasonable because this is a universal minig. It's based on the passage in the Zohar that we mentioned before, that the children's reciting the Kaddish will spare their parents from suffering again, and if they're supposed to suffer, so this will bail the parents out from the suffering. So if the father says, "You give me the heebie-jeebies, I don't want you to recite Kaddish," so that's not proper on his part, since it's such a universal minig. Let's say many have a custom that they fast Monday, Thursday, and Monday following Sukkot, and Monday, Thursday, and Monday following Pesach, based on the story in the book of Job, in the book of Eov, that after the family would have a big get-together, they would eat and drink and be merry and have a good time. So Eov was afraid maybe some of the children had sinned, so he would bring sacrifices. He would do something in case they need a kapar, in case they need an atonement. So the Bali HaTosfos years ago introduced such a practice that Pesach is a long Yom Tov, Shavuos is very short, it's only 2 days, but Pesach is a whole week and Sukkot is a whole week long. We're afraid maybe someone in the family sinned, so they developed such a minig that many people would fast Monday, Thursday, Monday. So maybe years ago it was a common minig, but today hardly anybody fasts Sheni Machamishi V'Sheni, the Monday. The maximum that they do is they recite the Slichas. They add the special prayers in the Shacharis davening, but most of the people do not fast. So let's say the son decided he's going to fast on Monday, Thursday, Monday, whatever, and the father is the guest of honor at the annual dinner or whatever, and it's on Monday. In the middle of the day, it's on Monday. So the son won't be able to sit next to his father and eat at the dinner. The father says, "I'd like you to come to my dinner to honor me, and I want you to eat there also." It's going to look as if you don't trust the kashrus. Let's say the father's the rabbi of the shul. He's not going to eat in my shul. What's wrong? It's a good hashgacha. So since it's not such a widespread minig today that people fast, hardly anybody fasts Monday, Thursday, Wednesday, so that the father does have a right to say, "I want you to eat." You figure out how you're going to violate your minhag. Usually you're not allowed to violate a minhag. You have to make a hataras v'dor. That's your problem, figure it out, but I want you to eat with me at this meal, otherwise there's going to be a bizayin to me to look as if you don't trust my kashrus. So the din is, whenever the father is requesting that the child should violate a biblical prohibition to drive on Shabbos, a rabbinical prohibition to drive on Yom Tov, or a widespread minig, a universally accepted minig like reciting Kaddish, that's not proper, and there's no mitzvah of kibbut av. But if the father is asking the child to violate his personal private minig, but it's not a universal minig, so then the kibbut av does take precedence.
What happens if your child wants to marry outside of the faith?
So of course you tell him he's not allowed to. Yeah. So here the Shulchan Aruch says if the child is prepared to marry a nice Jewish girl, and the parents say, "An Ungarisha you marry?" What do you mean? You have to marry a Litvisha, you have to marry a Yekeh. How can you marry an Ungarisha? That's terrible. Galiciana, how can you do that? It's an unreasonable insistence on the part of the parents. So the parents don't like the girl. If the girl is not religious, so the parents should insist that the child shouldn't marry the girl. That's a reasonable taina. The child is going to do an aveira if he marries a girl who's not religious. So the parents should say, "We prohibit you from marrying the girl." and we'll see what the child will do. But if the child is marrying a nice Jewish girl, and the parents say, no, we don't want you to marry that girl. So what's going to be? You don't marry that girl, he's going to, just overnight, he's going to marry a different girl? No, it's going to take him another half a year till he meets another girl, till he did, more than a half a year, till he decides that he's going to propose to another girl. So they're postponing the child's ability to fulfill the mitzvah of getting married. We all have a mitzvah to get married and raise a family. So that's the first reason that the Vilna Gaon gives. That if the parents are opposed to the shidduch, they're opposed to the spouse that the child wants to marry, there's no din of kibbutz because the parents are interfering with the child's ability to perform a mitzvah. And this is a real mitzvah. This is not a private minig. This is a universal minig. This is a universal din. All Jews are obligated to get married and raise a family. The second reason the Vilna Gaon gives why there's no kibbutz when the parents are opposed to the shidduch is that the mitzvah of, there are two mitzvahs, there's a mitzvah of kibbud av and a mitzvah of mora av. The mitzvah of kibbud means to give service to the parents. My mother wanted me to become a doctor, my son the doctor, my son the lawyer, my son the engineer. And I want to become a Rebbe in Yeshiva, I'm not interested. So the parents have no right to run my life. That's not kibbud av. Kibbud av means I'm obligated to give service to the parents. Mora aviyim means you have to show respect for the parents, not to contradict them. And the parents say something not to contradict. So some commentaries on the Gemara are of the opinion that if the parents want me to go to medical school and I say don't want to go, that's a violation of Mora Aviyim because I'm contradicting their request. So the Vilna Gaon writes, we don't accept that opinion. That's not called Soseres Dvarim, contradicting the parents. Mora only means we should show respect for the parents, but the parents have no right to run our lives. So if the child fell in love with a nice Jewish girl and he wants to marry her, and the parents say, how can you marry this Hungarian girl? You have to marry Dafka Yeke, you have to marry whatever, a Litvisha. So there's no kibbud aviyim, not only because of the first reason, because they're interfering with the child's ability to fulfill a mitzvah of a peri b'rivi, getting married, raising a family, but for the other reason as well, that it's neither kibbud nor mora. Kibbud means to give service to the parents, and mora means to give respect to the parents. This is not included in either. This is not an issue of service to the parents. It's not an issue of respect for the parents either. There's nothing disrespectful. I like this girl, I want to marry the girl. Then the Vilna Gaon quotes the third reason, third explanation. He tells you to look in the previous sif where the Shulchan Aruch said, my father tells me he'd like to visit Eretz Yisrael. So I say, okay, Dad, give me your credit card and I'll make all the arrangements. He says, no, your credit card. You have a mitzvah kibbud aviyim, so you lay out the money. You spend, not lay out the money, you spend the money. You have the mitzvah kibbud aviyim. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Gemara that the child is not obligated to spend money for the purpose, if the father has money in the bank, the father has enough money. So the child is obligated to make all, if the father wants him to, he's obligated to make all the arrangements, call on the telephone, drive him to the airport, carry the luggage, and so on and so forth. But he's not obligated to spend any money. So the Vilna Gaon says, commenting over here, if the child is not obligated to spend money on the kibbud av, so he's not obligated to have his heart broken either. The boy fell in love with this girl, he wants to marry this girl. So the parents tell him, no, we don't want you to marry that girl. They have no right to break my heart. If they don't have the right to make me spend $5,000 on the trip to Eretz Yisrael, so they have no right to cause me to have a broken heart. So that's why there's no kibbud av. So we really accept all of the three explanations. The Vilna Gaon writes, each one of these explanations independently explains this din, why there's no kibbud av. The Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Gemara, number 8, the obligation of both kibbud and mora applies equally to men and to women. So the Gemara says we have a problem. The Chumash writes, Ish ima v'yaviv tiro. What does it say, Ish? The word Ish means men and not women. But women have the exact same obligation as the men regarding kibbud aviyim. So the Talmud explains, the women can't always fulfill the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim to the same extent as the men. Why? So the simple reading of the Gemara is the following. Years ago, when children would grow up, they were going to the same business as the father. The father says jewelry, so the son goes into the same business. And when he would get married, so the wife would move into the same building, to the adjacent building. Down the block, he would be in business with the father. The girl, let's say, comes from California. The boy lives in New York. The father's business is in New York. So the son lives in the same home, but after he gets married, he lives in the same home or a nearby home to the parents. He's in the business with the father. And the girl's parents live in California. So what? And the girl's mother is going to come up. Could you please come to California, help me bake the challah for Shabbat? That's unreasonable. So that's what the Gemara says. When the woman is married and she lives in a different city and she's raising her children, and she has to take care of her husband's needs, she has to wash their clothing and make the meals and so on. What do you mean she's going to fly to California to help her mother bake the challah? That's unreasonable. Whenever the request that the parents are making is unreasonable, that's self-understood that it's not included in the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim. So the way the world runs today, the sons don't always go into the same business as the parents. And even if they do go into the same line, they don't necessarily live in the same city. The father's a doctor, the son is a doctor, but the son is a doctor in Eretz Yisrael, the father's a doctor in New York City. So the same din would apply to the son as to the daughter. If the son lives in a different city from the parents, and the son's parents, the boy's parents are going to call up long distance and say, can you please come and help us out? We're moving, so we need a little help. What do you mean, you're moving from one location to the other? So I should fly from Eretz Yisrael to New York, pay some people and pay some movers to help you move. What do you mean? I should come to New York is unreasonable. So whenever the request that the parents make is unreasonable, so it's self-understood that it's not included in the mitzvah of kibbud av.
Let's say you have elderly parents in another state, and you need they need help. How am I obligated to pay for whatever services? They don't have the money for those services to take care of themselves.
So let's say, start one at a time. Let's say we have elderly parents. So if they can't take care of themselves, I'm supposed to take them into my home. If it's going to wreak havoc on my home, they're all so old, my children are going to be petrified. Father has Alzheimer's, whatever, it's going to be a terrible thing. So, or it's going to ruin my shalom bayis. So if it's absolutely unreasonable, that if it is reasonable, so I should take the parents into my home. If it's unreasonable, so I don't take them into my home. If they can't afford, they don't have money, the son has money, so then the Shulchan Aruch said the son is obligated to spend the money to put them in a home or to have someone take care of them in their own home. The Shulchan Aruch quotes in the bottom, number 9, that's an interesting din. A person who converts to the Jewish religion, so strictly speaking, the halacha says, Gershin is gayer kukot mishanel adomi. Non-Jew who converts is no longer related to his previous relatives. So strictly speaking, biblically, if you have a brother and a sister and they both convert, they're permitted to marry each other. If you have a mother and a son, biblically they're allowed to marry each other. But it looks terrible. So midirabbanah, the rabbis don't permit it. But biblically they're not related, so there's no problem. So the Rambam writes, based on that's a passage in the Gemara. So the Rambam writes, based on a passage in the Medrash, that this concept applies also to kibbud aviyim. If a non-Jew converts, and strictly speaking, they're no longer related to their parents. So even though now they're Jewish, non-Jews are not obligated to observe kibbud aviyim or mor aviyim. This is not one of the 7 mitzvahs that were given to the non-Jewish people. But now that the child converted, so there's a din of kibbud aviyim, but he's no longer related to the parents. But what will it look like? It'll look terrible. The people will say, when he was a non-Jew, so he used to show respect and service to the parents. Now that he's Jewish and he moved away, he lives in Borough Park, he lives in Williamsburg, whatever, so now he never visits the parents. So it'll look terrible as if when you become Jewish, so you act like an idiot, you don't act like a normal human being. So the Rambam quotes from the Medrash that midirabbanan, rabbinically, we require of the child that they should observe kibbud aviyim towards their non-Jewish parents. So they have to go visit once in a while. The non-Jewish parents don't have a kosher home. They don't observe Shabbos, of course. It does make sense that they should put the child who converted should have put himself into a difficult situation that he won't be able to function on Shabbos and so on. But they have to try to the best of their ability to show kibbud aviyim. I remember there was a situation where there was a boy marrying a girl. The girl was a convert. The boy was 10 generations rabbinical family. He himself had smicha. He was a practicing doctor, but he had smicha. His father was a rabbi. His grandfather was a very prominent rabbi, great-grandfather, all the way back, at least 10 generations. And the girl had converted. Her mother was a very pious Catholic who walked around with a big cross, with a big crucifix on her neck. So they were going to get married, so the mother was going to come to the wedding. She was going to wear the crucifix under her gown, not to offend a Jewish mechutar. So the girl wanted her mother to march her down the aisle. The boy's father had passed away a long time before, so his mother was going to march him down the aisle, and she wanted her mother to march her down the aisle. It was her mother, she loved her. They loved each other. So his mother felt very uncomfortable. His mother was a Rebbetzin. So his mother felt very uncomfortable. How can the Goyish and Mechatenis march down the aisle? So they came and they asked me. I remember we were a singles weekend at that time. So they asked me, what do I think? So I said, if you're not going to let her mother march her down the aisle, then you shouldn't allow your mother to march you down the aisle either. That's the din of kibbud aviyim. You can't hurt her feelings. With the Rabbanon, you have to show the same kibbud aviyim to the non-Jewish parent as you're going to show to the Jewish parent. And if you feel you feel uncomfortable to allow the Jewish mother to march, if you feel uncomfortable to allow the Catholic mother to march her daughter down the aisle, then you have to ask your mother also to stand on the side. She shouldn't march her down the aisle either, because she didn't have a husband, neither had a husband. They didn't listen to me. And they got divorced later on. Shidduch was no good. They got divorced because they were incompatible. The girl had a photograph of her brother with his family, who is not Jewish, under the Christmas tree, in his home under the Christmas tree, and she put the photograph on the piano. And her husband, who was born Jewish, 10 generations rabbis, and he himself had smicha from RJJ, this hurt him very much. How can you have a picture of the Christmas tree on the piano? And she didn't see, why does it hurt him? He's not Jewish. Her brother's not Jewish, and we're Jewish. So what's the problem? So there were several issues that they were simply incompatible, because she was a Gioris and he was a regular Jew. So everything fell apart.
Would a convert sit Shiva and say Kaddish for non-Jewish parents?
Strictly speaking, not obligated to sit Shiva, but it says in Shulchan Aruch that if one loses a dear friend, even if it's not a relative, it is meaningful to sit Shiva for someone other than a relative. So that's why, let's say, if one is an adopted child and the adopted parent dies, so even though strictly speaking the child is not related to the parent, not a blood relative, nonetheless, we recommend that the child should observe Shiva because it's a dear friend. The parents raised them. So here also, if the child feels so close to the parent, they feel it's going to be meaningful either to themselves or to the family, that they should observe Shiva. If they want to, they can volunteer an observance of Shiva, even though strictly speaking they're certainly not obligated to because they're not related. Reciting Kaddish, also the same thing. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef has a tshuva about that. He says if the convert feels they'd like to recite Kaddish for the non-Jewish parent, gesundheit. If they want to, they may. They're not obligated to because strictly speaking there's no obligation of kibbud av, but if they choose to, we wouldn't oppose it. The din of kibbud aviyim, the way it's presented in Shulchan Aruch, is only if it's reasonable. Let's say, I remember there was a boy in the yeshiva, he said that his mother has Lou Gehrig's disease, and he had an opportunity. He was a sefer, he was very learned, he was a sefer. They wanted him to go somewhere in Europe, to spend a lot of time in Europe to check all the Sifrei Torah and to write mezuzahs and everything. And he used to take care of his mother. So he asked me, is it okay if he leaves the mother alone, because the father was an elderly person? Should he stay home with his mother all the time, or should he go take this position, take this job in Europe? So I said, what do you mean? You're going to stay with your mother forever? It's not reasonable. You have to get married. He says, no, by the time he's going to be holding to get married, the mother won't be alive anymore. At that time, the life expectancy was such that in another couple of years she's going to die. As it turns out, her life expectancy was extended because they have some kind of medications. So he felt obligated to service the mother. But let's say to service the mother, li'olam v'od, and never to get married, that's unreasonable. Kibbud aviyim does not include to give service to the parents to the extent of losing your own life. That's unreasonable. So the Shulchan Aruch says the din of kibbud aviyim only applies when it's within reason. If it's not reasonable, it certainly doesn't apply. The Shulchan Aruch quotes a dispute that appears here in number 7 of the Marmakaimis. Is there a din, is there a mitzvah of kibbud aviyim if the parent is a Russian? The parent is a non-religious person, anti-religious, non-religious. Is there a mitzvah of kibbud aviyim and mora aviyim? So the Rambam's opinion is that yes. The Rambam has sources in the Gemara that yes. And the Shulchan Aruch, usually Rabbi Yosef Karo, usually adopts the position whenever there's a dispute between the Rambam and the Bali HaTosfos. Rabbi Yosef Karo is known as the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, usually adopts the position of the Rambam. And he does over here. He writes that the child is obligated to give service and to show respect for the parent, even though the parent is not religious at all. The Ramah adopts the position of the Bali HaTosfos based on another Gemara, the Gemara in Hazel Neshech, that when the parent is not religious, there's no mitzvah of kibbud aviyim at all. The mitzvah simply doesn't apply. I remember once there was a boy in Yeshiva whose father was a big conservative rabbi. He was being honored by the conservative rabbinate because he was such a successful conservative rabbi for 35 years or whatever. So the father wanted the son. He lived far away from New York. The father wanted the son to come home to attend this dinner that they're honoring him. So even if you have to show respect and give service to the parent who's not religious, but if they're honoring him because he's not religious, so that doesn't make sense. Honoring my father because he eats chazah, see, that's not kibbud aviyim. If they honor my father because he's a good football player, okay. So my father's not religious, I should show respect. According to the Shulchan Aruch, I should show respect to my father. I should attend. I should be mahana him. But if they're honoring him because of the averis that he does, there's no mitzvah of kibbud aviyim over there. There is a famous discussion that's raised by one of the commentaries, the Minchas Chinuch, and others, Maram Shik, regarding what is the nature of the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim. We usually assume there are two categories of mitzvahs. There are really three. There are mitzvahs ben adam la'makom, between man and God. We have to observe Shabbos. We have to observe kashrus, we have to wear tefillin, we have to recite Kriya Shema, and then we have mitzvahs bein adam lachaver, between man and man. You have to give someone a loan if he needs it, you have to help people out, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't harm anyone else. And then there's really a third category. The earlier svarim, the earlier authorities generally divide the mitzvahs into these two categories, bein adam la'makom, bein adam lachaver, between man and God, and man and man. And then the Vilna Gaon points out, no, there's a third category, bein adam li'atzmo. The mitzvah midos tovos. The Torah tells us for halachta b'dracha, we have to imitate the ways of God because we were all created b'tzelem alakim. So we are instructed by the Torah to preserve, to maintain our tzelem alakim. How do you preserve the tzelem alakim? What we have divine image within us. Man was created b'tzelem alakim. So we have to go in the ways of God. That's the way to preserve the tzelem alakim. So the Minchas Chinuch and others raise the question: what is the nature of this mitzvah? Of showing, let's say, showing respect for the parents, or giving service to the parents. The mitzvah kibbud is to give service, the mitzvah mar is to show respect. Is it a mitzvah bein adam lachavero, that we owe a debt of gratitude to our parents? Parents brought us into the world, and they raised us, and they sent us through college, and they gave us a Jewish education, and even if they never gave us a Jewish education, if they just brought us into the world, even if they're not, they don't pay our way through school, they brought us into the world, so we owe them a debt of gratitude. Is it bein adam lachavero? We owe a debt of gratitude to the parents. Or is it really bein adam la'makom, between man and God? Why so? The Talmud has a statement, Shlosha shutfim yesh ba'adam. When a person is born, there are three partners in bringing the person into this world: the father, the mother, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ribbon Shalom. So the Ribbon Shalom says you should show respect for your parents, and I'm the invisible partner. The father and the mother we see, tangible, they're here in front of us. So if we'll show respect for the parents, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God will consider it as if we showed respect to Him. And if we'll service our parents, we'll give kibbud aviyim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will consider it as if we gave service to Him. Even though He's invisible, there's no way to give Him service, there's no way to show respect for Him. So this is the question that the Minchas Chinuch raises. What's the nature of the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim? Should we assume it's bein adam lachavero, a way to express our gratitude towards the parents, or is it really bein adam la'makom, to indirectly show respect and give service to the Rebbeinu Shalom, who's the invisible partner over here? What is the difference, whether like this or like that? So the Minchas Chinuch gives several nafkaminas, several differences. So one difference he has is like this. Let's say the child has not observed kibbud aviyim. He treats the parents the same as everybody else. He gets married and he moves to another continent. So how does he fulfill kibbud aviyim? He should call on the telephone every so often, send photographs of the grandchildren, come to visit once in a while. Never visits, never sends photographs, never calls on the telephone. Doesn't he treats the parents like everybody else. He's not abusive of the parents. He doesn't insult them. He doesn't curse them. But he doesn't go out of his way to be mahana the parents. That's the mitzvah of kibbud avim, to service the parents, to be mahana them, to give them nachas. He doesn't try to give them any nachas. And then it'll occur to the child that he should do tshuva. So whenever a person does an avera, bein adam lachavera, he hurt someone else, he has to first ask forgiveness for the other person, and then he can say be doing the shmoneh. So before if I stole money from someone else, first I have to pay back the money, then have to apologize to the person. Or if I harmed someone, I damaged this property, I have to pay whatever the hefsid is, whatever the loss is, then I have to apologize to that person, and then I can begin to daven that God should forgive me for the aver that I did. If I did an aver ben adam lamakam, I just talk to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So if kibbud aviyim is a mitzvah only ben adam lamakam, so I don't have to ask any apology of the parent. I didn't abuse them, I didn't insult them, I just forgot about them. The last 20 years, I just forgot about them. I moved to another continent, I just lost contact with my parents, but I didn't abuse them. So if it's an aver ben adam lachavero, then I have to ask mechila of the parents before I can begin to do tshuva. But if it's only an aver ben adam lamakam, so the parents are not the balei dvarim over here. So that's one issue that the Minchas Chinuch raises. Maram Shik has another fascinating, he raises the same question, he has another fascinating nafkamina ladina. If I owe you $100,000 and we're good friends, and everyone's doing well in business, and you say, you're Michael, you're Mavate the $100,000. So I say, thank you very much, that's wonderful. Then 10 years go by, and we don't get along anymore. And we're not friendly anymore. And you say, remember the $100,000 that I was Michael? I want you to pay the money now. So tough luck, you ready with Michael? Once you're Michael, say, Michael, you have no right to demand that I should pay you the money. So the Maharam Shik, who was a Talmud of the Chasam Sofer in the late 1800s, has such a situation. He has a shaila that the child didn't get along with the father, and at a young age, the child was in his 20s, and the father tells the child, I'm moichel to keep it av, don't do me any favors, goodbye and good luck, don't do me any, I don't need your keep it aviyeh. So the child, the father was angry at the child. So the child said, okay. So he's not in touch with the father for whatever, 40 years. Now the father's already 100 years old, whatever, and now he can use a little help. So he calls up the son and he says, maybe you can help me out. So the son says, but Dad, he said, you're Michael. So what's the nature of the din that if the father is Michael and the kibbud av, when I wanted to cook a cup of coffee for my father said, I'm not an invalid. I can cook out of my own. So the din is if the parent is Michael and the kibbud av, so you don't force it. There's no kibbud av. Why is that? So one could explain because Ritzona Shel Adam Zehu Kvoda. What's the definition of kavod? Kavod is whatever service the father wants. That's the mitzvah, to give him that service. If he does want the service, then that's not, by definition, it's not called kavod. It's not that the father has the ability to be moichel. It's not, if it would be if the mitzvah of kibbud av, to give service to the parents, or to show respect to the parents, is bein adam lachavero, so then the father, the parents, are the balabatim to be moichel. If the mitzvah is bein adam lamakom, maybe it's both bein adam lamakom and bein adam lachavero, but if it's also bein adam lamakom, then the father is not the balabas. He has no ability to be moichel. It's really, the kavod is due to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the kavod in the Mara is due to God, and the parents are just indirectly, by showing the kavod in the Mara to the parents, indirectly are being mechabed and servicing and showing respect for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the invisible partner. So if the nature of the mitzvah is ben adam lamakom, then the parents have no ability to be moichel at all. It says they can be moichel. That's ritzonu shel adam zel kvara, because in this situation, by definition, it's not called kavod. But if you say the whole mitzvah is only ben adam lachavero, it's not ben adam lamakom. The whole mitzvah really is only ben adam lachavero. So then the parents are really the bailim. They have the ability to be moichel on the kavod. So this is the issue that the Minchas Chinuch raises and the Maharam Shik and his Tshuvas raise. Maharam Shik writes a very fascinating conclusion to this discussion. He says the Gemara says that the din of kibbud aviyim and mor aviyim even applies after the parents died. And he says there's never a shibud to a dead person. The only obligations of mitzvah ben adam lachavero, if I owe you money, so as long as you're alive, I owe you the money. once the person dies, you can't say, I owe you the money. I owe your children the money. It goes Birusha. You can't owe a debt to a person who's not alive. So if the Talmud tells us that the din of Kibbur Abiyim applies Mechabda Mechai, Mechabda Lachamosa, even after the parents die, so one could argue the point perhaps and say maybe it's only Midirabbanan. Maybe the obligation, that's what some commentaries, the Tiferes Yisrael and the Mishnayos writes like that. He thinks that the Kibbur Avi after death, after the parent passes away, is only Midirabbanan. But that's not usually accepted. We usually assume, the Gemara made a statement, the Shulchan Aruch says that the Kibbur Av applies even after the parents die. So the Mamshik writes, if the dinim of Kibbur or apply even after the parents die, that's a clear proof that at least there is also an aspect of Ben Adam Lamakom. Maybe it's also Ben Adam Lachaver, but it's also Ben Adam Lamakom, because you can't have a Ben Adam Lachaver after the person is dead. There are no shibudim, there are no obligations to a person is dead. Here in America they have, a person dies and leaves all his money to his dog. In halacha, there is no such thing. A dog can't own any money, and a dog, you can't be indebted to the dog. And a dead person is also like a dog. A dead person can't own any property. A dead person can't own any shibudim. There is no such thing owing a debt to a dead person. Person dies, goes Birusha. But Kibbur Aviyim doesn't go Birusha. I don't owe the debt of gratitude to the children. If the parent died and they still say there's a din of Kibbur Aviyim, so that's a clear indication, the Mamshik says, that there is at least also an aspect of Ben Adam Lamakom. So therefore the father cannot be Moichel Li'olam Vod. When the father said, I'm Moichel Li'olam Vod, what he meant was, don't do me any favors. By definition, it's not Kibbur. It's Onesh Adam Zeh Kvora. But he doesn't have really the ability to be Moichel. The Gemara has an interesting discussion in Masechah Sanhedrin. In addition to the dinim of Kibbur Aviyim, Mora Aviyim, there's a din of Mako Aviyim. A child is not allowed to cause the parent to bleed. So the Gemara has a discussion. What if the child is a dentist? And what if the child is a doctor? And the parents want him to treat. The parents would like the child to treat them. So is it permissible to the child? Is it permissible for the son who's a doctor to treat the parents? So it's a dispute in the Gemara. And the way it's accepted in the Shulchan Aruch, there are different opinions how we pass. And the way it's generally accepted is that if there's no other doctor available, so then the son is allowed to treat the parent, even though he's going to cause bleeding, because that's, if it's necessary to cause the gums to bleed, or necessary to draw some blood or something, so he's not, that's not called Mako Aviyim by definition. He's doing it for the benefit of the parents. So if there's no other doctor available, so we rely on the biblical din, the din derais. If there's another doctor available, so let the son, let the child not treat the parent, because he may scrape the gum a little bit more than he really has to. He may cause a little extra bleeding that wasn't really necessary medically. He may take out a little extra blood that wasn't really necessary. So it's a gzera midrabanan. Whenever there's another doctor available, let someone else treat the problem. What people usually do is that two dentists get together and I say, I'll treat your parents for nothing, you treat my parents for nothing. So each one is not treating his own parent. Sometimes there's a shaila, let's say the son is the best doctor in this field. Best doctor in the field, so it doesn't help that there are other doctors available. The parents want to get the best doctor. What if their son is not the best doctor in the field, but the parents trust their child more than they trust a stranger? So many Rabbanim are of the opinion that's also considered leka acher. There isn't another doctor. The parents feel uncomfortable to go to someone else. They feel more comfortable with their own son. They know the son loves them and he's going to take care of them. So many are of the opinion that's also called leka acher. There isn't another doctor available. What if you have the following situation? There are other doctors available and their son is not the best in the world. They don't have such trust in their son. But the son does it for nothing. And the other doctor is going to charge money. So what's the din? Who has to pay? So we usually assume that Kibbur Av is Mishal Av, lo Mishal Bein. The son is not mechuyev to pay. My father says, Hershel, I want to go to Eretz Yisrael. I say, you give me your credit card, I'll be happy to make all the phone calls. On your telephone, I'll make all the arrangements. But I'm not obligated to spend the money for the Kibbur Av. So what about over here? Here, the son wants to service the parents, but the din is he's not allowed to. There are other doctors available, and the parents are not so strongly attached to their child that they insist they only want to have their child treat them. They'll be happy if another doctor treats, but the parents want the child to do it because they'll do it for nothing. So is the son obligated to pay or not? So Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank has a tshuva, and he says as follows. He gives a mashal. This mashal is very interesting. Rabbi Soloveitchik said that this mashal is a true story. That there was a man who lived in Brisk, and his father was on his deathbed in Warsaw, which is quite a distance away. And he got a phone call from his father, or from the hospital, that the father is holding by the end, and the father would appreciate very much if the son would come and visit him. But it cost a lot of money to go from Brisk to Warsaw. So the son went to Rab Chaim Soloveitchik and he asked, am I obligated to spend the money to go by train to see my father, since it says in the Shulchan Aruch, the Kibbutz Av is Mishal Av, lo Mishal Bein. The son is not obligated to spend money on the Kibbutz Av. Rab Chaim Soloveitchik said, you are right, walk. So it's usually assumed that it was a joke. Walk. What, are you an idiot? Your father's on a deathbed, he wants you to come visit him. You're giving a whole pilpul, you don't want to spend money. Your whole mahalach is wrong. So Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank gives exactly that mashal. He doesn't say that the story happened to Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, and he says an analysis, and he says, strictly speaking, the person can walk. It'll take him a long time to walk. He'll lose 2 weeks of pay. He'll lose a lot of pay from, he won't be able to work for 2 weeks. His shoes will get ruined, and his feet will be falling off, but he'll be able to fulfill the Kibbutz Av without spending any money on the train. Why does he want to spend money on the train? That's not for the Kibbutz Av. He can do the Kibbutz Av without spending a penny. He can walk. He wants to spend the money on the train so he won't ruin his shoes, and he won't ruin his legs, and he won't lose 2 weeks of salary. So that's not spending money for Kibbutz Av. That's spending money for yourself. You don't want to ruin your shoes, you don't want to ruin your legs, and you don't want to lose 2 weeks worth of salary. And to lose salary, that's not called Kibbutz Av Mishal Av Lo Mishal Bein. Let's say my parents need some help, and the only way for me to help them is to take off a day from work, and they'll dock me from my pay. So it says you're mechuyev to take off from the work. That's not considered. It's not covered with the din that the child is not obligated to spend money for the purpose of the Kibbutz Av. That's not called spending money. Losing salary for the day is not the same as spending money. So Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank says in such a situation, the child will be obligated to pay the money to buy the ticket to go on the train. Because he's spending the money for his own purposes, not really for the Kibbutz Av. The Kibbutz Av he can do without spending a penny. So Tzvi Pesach Frank says that strictly speaking, the same applies over here. If the child is a doctor, min haTorah, biblically, the child is permitted to treat his parents. And even though he's going to cause bleeding, it's all done for medical purposes. There's no violation of Maka Aviv Imo. Causing the parent to bleed is a prohibition. It's a serious aver, but it's only aver if it's not done for medical purposes. Done for medical purposes, it's permissible. So why did the rabbis prohibit the son to treat the parents if there are other doctors available? Because we're afraid the child shouldn't cause extra bleeding unnecessarily. So the son doesn't want to violate an avera. So the son is spending money for his own purposes. Strictly speaking, he's obligated to treat the parents and to cause the bleeding, because it's mutam and atar to cause the bleeding, and he's able to do it. With the Rabbanan, he doesn't want to treat the parents himself because he may do an avera. So he's spending money to have the parents go to another doctor in order that he shouldn't violate an avera. So that's not the Kibbutz Av he can really do on his own. He can treat them. He's spending money. Like in the other case, he's spending money because he doesn't want to ruin his shoes, he doesn't want to ruin his legs, he doesn't want to lose 2 weeks worth of salary. So here also the son is obligated to spend the money, that the son shouldn't violate the avera of causing extra bleeding on the parent. In such a situation, the din of Kibbutz Av being Mishal Av, Lo Mishal Bein, wouldn't apply. That's a famous tshuva of Tzvi Pesach. Maybe people should present some situations and we'll be able to discuss them. Yeah?
What if a parent wants you to do something, but you reasonably feel it's something they could do themselves and it's for their best interest to remain independent to do it themselves? Can you sort of say, why don't you try it yourself or do it on your own?
You have to try to say in a nice way that they should do it on their own. Yeah. You're not supposed to always give in to the parents. The parents like to smoke, and they're smoking themselves to death, and they're going to die earlier than a normal person, and they keep on buying cigarettes, and hiding it. So the children should remove the cigarettes. They should take it away. They shouldn't. The parents are eating food that's absolutely unhealthy for them. So there's no mitzvah of kibbud av to let the parents get away with their mishigasim. If it's unhealthy, so the children have the mitzvah of kibbud av. They should do it with a smile. They should try to do it in a pleasant. They shouldn't bark at the parents. The pasuk says, "Ora makla ova v'ima." You're not allowed to be abusive to your parents, even if there's a good reason. But they should not give in to the parents. You're not supposed to give in when the parents are making an unreasonable request, unreasonable for me, unreasonable for them. That's not included in kibbud. Yes.
The Torah says, He's not doing it to honor his parents. He's doing it to promote his life.
Okay. Okay. There are several mitzvahs where the Torah promises a reward, right? The Talmud says that if a person doesn't want to shake a lulav, if a person doesn't want to eat matzah, so it's the obligation of the Beis Din, if you have a Jewish government, application of the Jewish government, to force all the people to keep all of the mitzvahs. So kibbud aviyim is an exception to the rule, because the Torah promises a reward. So the Beis Din doesn't have to pressure him. The fact that the Torah promises a reward, he's going to live to a ripe old age, so that should be enough encouragement. That's called a mitzvah saseh, shematan schor betzida. The Torah promises, there are several mitzvahs, quite a few mitzvahs. Everybody knows about kibbud av and about shiluach hakan, about sending free the mother bird. But the Torah promises laman yarich and yamecha on honesty in business also. That a lot of people forgot about that. It says you have to have honest weights and measurements and so on. Deal honestly in business. Also the Torah promises man yarich and yamecha. That's maybe more important than the whole kibbud av. Yeah.
Is there any different respect between a parent versus a Rebbe or a grandparent as far as administering respect? Or is it all the same?
Kibbud aviyim for grandparents is a dispute in Shulchan Aruch. Rashi in his commentary on Chumash writes that when Yaakov brought korbanos when he was running away from Esav, he brought korbanos lelekei aviv Yitzchak. Why lekei aviv Yitzchak? Why not lekei aviv Abraham? So Rashi quotes from the Medrash, Chai v'adam mikvod aviv yosem mikvod aviv. One is obligated to show kibbud av to a parent to a greater extent than keep it up to a grandparent. So the Shulchan Aruch has a dispute. What does that mean? It means that there's no obligation to keep it up to the grandparents at all? Oh no, there is an obligation, but it's more so, there's more of a mitzvah to keep it up to the parent than there is to the grandparent. So that's two, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber writes there's no obligation to keep it up to the grandparents, and the Ramah thinks that it's not so. He thinks that there is an obligation, but it's less of an obligation. The Gemara in the end of Soita tells the situation. A child was an orphan and he was raised by his grandparents. And then the grandfather asked him, could you make me a cup of coffee? So the kid tells him, you're not my father, I'm not obligated to show you kibbud aviyim. He's obligated out of hakaras hatayv. The grandfather raised him. So even if a goy would raise the child, anyone raises a stranger, next door neighbor, you have to show hakaras hatayv. But the child said, strictly speaking, there's no obligation of kibbud av to the grandfather, even though the grandfather raised the child. I was raised by my grandparents for a while because my parents lived in Philadelphia. There was no yeshiva at that time. So they sent me to New York, to the big city, to go to yeshiva. I stayed by my grandparents. Yeah. Kibbud, kavod to the Rebbe is another kind of kavod you have to show. Kavod to the Rebbe doesn't mean...
Same level?
Different levels. The Talmud has an expression, any service that a slave is obligated to do for his master who owns him, the Talmud is obligated to do for his Rebbe. Very startling statement. Now we don't have slavery, Lincoln freed the slaves. But years ago there used to be an institution of slavery, so a person would purchase a slave. So I own this slave, the slave is obligated to do service to his master. So the Talmud makes such a startling statement. Whatever service, whatever jobs, if I ask him to please wash my car, to please wash the dishes, to please vacuum the rug, whatever I ask him, please do the laundry. So whatever service a slave would be obligated to do for his master, so the student is obligated to do for the Rebbe. So Leitchik used to explain this, a very beautiful explanation. He said, what's the definition of a Rebbe? He said the two types of Rebbe. The Gemara says there's a Rabbi Muvok and a Rabbi Sheda Muvok. I learned in the yeshivas. In the first grade, I had one Rebbe, second grade, I had another Rebbe, third. They're all my Rabbeim. They're all my Rabbeim. But then there's one Rebbe who had the main influence on me. That's a Rebbe Shirov Chachmasa Himenu. Most of my Torah learning I got from that Rebbe. So Rabbi Soloveitchik used to say, what do you mean? He knows 1,000 dinim and 501 dinim he heard from this Rebbe. That's what it means. Literally, Rav Chachmasa, 51% of his knowledge he got from that Rebbe. He didn't think that that's what it meant. He thought that the Gemara meant, who is the person who formed my Torah personality? Who is the one who made me into if I am a Torah personality? Who is the person who changed me and made me into a Torah personality? So that's considered as if the Rebbe created something in me that wasn't there from before. And there is a din. In the Rambam, he gave a whole background for this. If a person creates something, God created the world. So God owns the world because he created the world. So there's a passage in the Rambam, if there's a field that's hefker, it doesn't belong to anybody, and I plant something in the field, so the field remains hefker, but whatever grows belongs to me. A person who creates shvach, a person who improves something, so that improvement belongs to the one who created that improvement. So if the Rebbe had such an influence on the student that he created his Torah personality, so the Rebbe owns the student like the master owns the slave. So that's why the Talmud and the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, they all have this expression. Any service that the slave is obligated to give the master, the student is obligated to give his Rebbe, if he's a Rebbe Muvok, because the Rebbe owns the student to a certain extent. It's a surprising statement. Usually there's not going to be a conflict. There's a din of kavod to the melech also. You have to show respect to the melech. That's the highest form of kavod to the melech. And then to the Talmidei Chachamim is a little lower. And then to the parents is a little lower.
If a person, let's say, is 50 years old and they never experienced their parents in their life at all, and then when they're 50 they meet their parents, are they required to respect them?
I mean, the only connection they had was they brought them into the world and they gave them up for adoption or whatever.
And then they come into his life and he's 50 years old.
Strictly speaking, they are obligated to observe. They have to have the debt of Hakoras HaToy for the fact that they brought them into the world. The question is, what if the parents were abusive parents? What if the government took the children away from the parents because they were abusing their children? So then probably not obligated to. Or if it'll be so detrimental to the health of the child to start showing kibbud av to this parent, I never saw him before, I have no connection with him whatsoever, psychologically it'll have a negative effect on me. So also, like the parents tell me, don't marry that girl. So I'm not obligated to be heartbroken over it. So if it's going to be very detrimental to this is an abusive father, he used to abuse his children, so the children are not obligated to observe kibbud av if it's going to hurt them very much. But it was not going to hurt that much just because he hasn't seen the parent since he was born. So strictly speaking, this still is a din of kibbud av.
So wouldn't that mean to say that the obligation is between you and God and not between one of the friends? Either
that, or because we owe a debt of gratitude for that alone, the fact that the parents brought us into the world. We owe a debt of gratitude for that alone. Regularly, you owe a debt of gratitude. They brought us into the world, and they diapered us, and they brought us up, and they sent us through college, and they helped us get married, and all the way. And even if the debt of gratitude is only because of the fact that they brought us into the world, dayenu, that's enough to be obligated to express their gratitude. Rabbi Yosef Engel has a very fascinating comment on the question that we raised before from the Minchas Chinuch and the Maharam Shik. What's the nature of the mitzvah of kibbud aviyim? Is it a mitzvah shebein adam lamakam, an indirect way to show kavod to the Ribono Shel Olam, or is it to express a debt of gratitude towards the parents? So he comments, the Gemara makes a statement that noyach la'adam sheloi nivra mishenivra. It would really have been better for man if we wouldn't have been brought into this world, because it's so difficult. It's so easy to sin, and it's so difficult to stay straight, to keep all the mitzvahs. So it would have been better that we shouldn't have been brought into this world. So Tosfos makes a comment on that Gemara. It's better that man shouldn't be brought into the world if he's an average person. What if he's an unusual tzaddik? Ashrei lo, ashrei doro. And it's the praises of him, the praises of the generation that such a person is around. So Rabbi Yosef Engel says, do we owe a debt of gratitude to our parents that they brought us into the world? We should sue them. It would have been brought, the Gemara says it would have been better that we should have not been brought into the world. If the child is an unusual tzaddik, then you owe a debt of gratitude to the parents. They brought you into the world, Ashrei Lo v'Ashrei Ledora. But if a child is an average person, nobody special, then it can't be a debt of gratitude that you have to the parents. It's only Ben Adam Lamokim. So he said, this is the meaning of the passage in the Chumash that it says, on the way to Har Sinai, when the Jewish people were traveling 7 weeks in between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Har Sinai, so they stopped off in the city Morah, and it says, Sham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the mitzvah of Kibbut Aviyim in Morah. That's the tradition that the Talmud has. The Pasuk doesn't say he gave the mitzvah of Kibbut Aviyim, it says, Sham, Sam lo chok o mishpat. God gave the Jewish people chok o mishpat. What in the world is chok o mishpat? Rabbi Yosef Engel says that's what it means. A mitzvah that's sometimes a chok and sometimes a mishpat. If the child is an unusual tzaddik, then it's a mishpat. It's ben adam lahaver. You owe a debt of gratitude to the parents. And if the child is nothing special, then you don't owe a debt of gratitude to the parents. Then kibbut aviyim is only a chok. So the mitzvah of kibbut aviyim is described by the Chumash as chok or mishpat. Chok / mishpat. Sometimes a chok, sometimes mishpat, depending on who you are. If you're somebody special, then it's a mishpat. Then you owe a debt of gratitude to the parents. That's Rabbi Yosef Engel published the sefer when his mother passed away. So out of kavod for his mother, he published 7 essays, 7 essays that you should get in the Chumah. And one of the essays he writes about the topic of kibbut aviyim.
It's a two-part question. In the hierarchy of a gadol hador, a parent, and an elderly person, someone 97 who's a Holocaust survivor, what is the hierarchy of kavod? And the second one, if both parents are ill and equally demanding, and the mother is older than the father, who do you respond to first?
The Talmud says when the parents are still married to each other, so and the father and the mother are both making requests of the children, and the nature of the request is such that the wife should really do this kind of service for the husband if she's able to, let's say to prepare some food or something like that. So then, since the wife is obligated to do it for the husband, and both the father and the mother are requesting of the child, so the child should respond first to the father, then to the
if the wife is not able to. Very common in today's society where both parents are elderly, unable to care for themselves, equally demanding.
And they're still married. If they get divorced, then it's equal. They're still married. She can't. So if the mother's not in a position to do anything for the father, so then it's equal. So you have to just figure out which way will be the lesser of the two evils. You have to figure out which is the lesser of the two evils. The kavod to the gadol hador, it doesn't really come in conflict with the kavod to the parents. How's there a conflict? It's a different kind of a kavod. Gadol hador, when someone speaks in the shul, so we go to hear the person speak. But it doesn't really mean I have to service my parents and I can't attend the function in the shul, so I'll listen on the internet. The kibbut aviyim you can't do on the internet. The gadol hador speaking, you listen on the internet. You pick it up. It'll be written up in the newspaper, so you read about it.
If a father requests from his son to give a specific name to his grandson, is the child supposed to name the kid whatever his parent wants, or can he decide with his own mind?
The parents have no right to dictate to the children how they should lead their lives. That's not right. It says in Shulchan Aruch that parents should be careful not to be too imposing on the children, because they really have no right to insist on what the name should be. That's not proper. That's not proper. Rabbi Soloveitchik told over the story that he used to say like this: I was the oldest child in my family, and I was named after my father's grandfather. Yosef Dov was the father of Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik. He said that, and then he says, so what's the kasha? So the students will go, what's the kasha? No, what's the kasha? We didn't know. So the kasha is like this. Where he came from, it was assumed al pi din and al pi minig. I don't know what this means. This is what he said. Al pi din and al pi minig, that the mother has a right to give the name to the first child. So if he was the oldest child, how come he was named for his father's grandfather? His mother should have chosen the name. That's supposed to be the kasha. None of the students realized that there was a kasha. So he says the answer is that when he was born, his grandfather Rab Chaim came to his mother, and he asked her as a taiva, as a favor, even al pi din and al pi minig, you're entitled to give the first name, but no one gave a name yet for my father, Rabbi Yosef Dave, the Beis HaLevi. So please do me a favor, give your child a name after my father, and I'll agree to be the sandik at the bris. So she agreed. Okay, came to the bris. He was afraid of blood, so he did not serve as the sandik. He didn't live up to his. That's what Rabbi Zolechik said. He didn't live up to his half of the deal. But his mother had already agreed that they're going to give the baby the name Yosef Dave after the father's grandfather. That's an issue in today's parsha, Parshas Vayeshev. Who has the right to name the baby? The mother, the father, the first baby, the second baby. It's an issue in today's parsha. Who's calling all the names?
Is there a hierarchy of obligation? If a woman has a child who has to be fed, and the parents call and say, I need your help right now, or if a woman has a husband and the husband says, you're going over and helping your parents too much, you're never home, how do you manage that? Right, that's what the Shulchan Aruch quotes from the Talmud. Even though these mitzvahs of kibbud av and morav apply equally to the men and to the women, but the Chumash says ish. Why does it say ish? Sounds like ish v'lo isha. Because when the woman is married, she has to take care of her children, she has to take care of her husband's needs. So it's not reasonable to expect that she should drop everything in her own home and go take care of her parents. Is that the same obligation on a man, that can the husband reduce his home responsibility to take care of his parents? No, also not right. Same thing if it's unreasonable. In the days of the Talmud, the days of the Shulchan Aruch, the husband would be in the same business with his father. He's living in the same house as his parents, he's there all the time. So it's not going to be a conflict. He'll be able to take care of the parents and take care of his children at the same time. But the way things are today, that the parents and the children live on a different continent, and they live many miles apart from each other, so it's really the same, whether it's the son or the daughter. If they live really far away from the parents, and it's unreasonable to expect the children to drop everything that they're doing, raising their children, or with their spouses, they can't drop everything and go take care of the parents. So if it's unreasonable, there's no mitzvah of kibbud av again. At what point does a person say to themselves, I owe it to myself to have a life for myself, to get married, to move on? At what point does something like that happen, or does it not have to happen? You shouldn't get into that situation?
Of course. It has to be within reason. What? The person should wait till he's 30 years old to get married. You should get married when it's normal to get married. So if the parents need help, what can you do? The children have to move on in life. They shouldn't wait till after 30. They should get married at a normal time. Whatever they can do for kibbud av, they'll do. Not mechuyev to give up your whole life for the parents.
Do you show the same appearance to your in-laws?
The Shulchan Aruch points out that there is an obligation to be respectful to the in-laws. You shouldn't call them by the first name. A lot of people violate that. They call their in-laws by the first name, or they're too respectful to the in-laws. They say, when I first got married, so I used to refer to my mother-in-law as Rebbetzin Shapiro. So she was very hurt by that. She wanted me to call her Ma. So I started calling her Ma. You're not allowed to call her in too bekavadik expression. You have to use an expression. You can't call her by her first name, and you have to call her in a bekavadik way. Mama, something like that. They quote the pasuk that David HaMelech was the son-in-law of Shaul, and he refers to him as Avi. He calls him dad, pop. The commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch say that one is obligated to show respect and give service to the parents-in-law, not the same as real parents, like we respect elders, like we respect those who are older than us. But there is an issue of kibbud av. One should not refer to the in-laws by the first name, and they have to be endearing when they speak to them.
Based on the premise that you have to, father, that the wife has to, based on the premise that the father has to honor his parents, why does the honor of the father come before the grandfather?
the Talmud tells us the child who's obligated to give service to the father and to the mother equally, and the mother is obligated to give service to the father, so then the father takes precedence. But here if there's no obligation at all to give service to the grandfather, so then it's not a kasha. Even if one should assume that there is an obligation to give kavod to the grandfather, but the pasuk tells us the obligation to the father is stronger than that to the grandfather. That's a pasuk.
This is the last question, because we could be here all night. We have a repository of the entire Talmud and Shulchan Aruch in front of us, but this is the last question. And then we'll dive in.
What would be the best way for a beautiful daughter-in-law to address his father-in-law? Like, she referred to him once as dad, and he got a little unnerved about that. At the same time, using just the Mr. and the last name sounds a little cold. So what would be the best way to deal with that?
She calls her own father dad, so she feels uncomfortable calling her father-in-law dad. So you call him pap, you call him papa or something, abba, whatever, some other expression. But has to be something along those lines.
Like certain people in the family call him by his first name, but that's, it's not what I would do personally. But the other daughter-in-law calls him by his first name. I'm not sure that that's the best way to go either.
Right, we assume that's not proper. To refer to a parent-in-law by the first name is not proper.
Yeah.
Very good. Believe it or not, the mitzvah of kibbut aviyim still applies bisman hazeh. It's in Aseres HaDibros, and you would look around, you wouldn't believe it. They say that Rab Dessler lived in England for many years, and his father lived in Eastern Europe, Lithuania. He sent his father letters 3 times a week, and he felt that he was negligent in kibbut aviyim. He sent letters 3 times a week with photographs of the children and everything, and he felt he wasn't fulfilling the mitzvah properly. The mitzvah of kibbut aviyim is to be mahana the parents, to give service. Let's say I have 9 children, so we used to enjoy having the Shabbos table all together. On the weekdays, everybody left at a different time, we didn't see each other. But on Shabbos, we were always together. So the children a lot of times want to go to their friends, want to go to a Shabbaton. So that's unreasonable on the part of the parents to insist we want the children to be home every single Shabbos, every single Yom Tov. But it's also unreasonable on the part of the children that they're never there for Shabbos. Every Shabbos there's another Shabbaton. Every Shabbos they're going away. That's a violation of kibbut aviyim. They service the parents by being mahana them, by sitting at the table. They're not giving, even if they're not serving the food. That itself is being mahana the parents. Parents have nachas to see the table with all the children around. That's a fulfillment of the mitzvah, kibbut aviyim.